For Michael, development of key patterns over the course of time. Anything of recent vintage happening with key patterns that you've worked on?
In my own projects, you mean?
In anything. Have you seen anything new?
I've been experimenting a lot with transmutations as per my work with Cynthia, and so I've been experimenting a lot with the setup of the grid. I saw that David kind of winged it on his wonky parts, and I found that fascinating because I was looking at it, seeing the grid being very regular on a very, very small scale, and then suddenly enlarged to a larger, could be done on a grid or could be done freehand. And I've been getting a lot into that because it's once you've mastered the basic layout of triangular keys or whatever, or mazes, it, like anything else, it becomes old hat, and you want to challenge yourself and make it fresh again. And so I've been trying to see how the grid could be affecting the transitions, and I found that you can lay out the same number of units in a grid, but how you lay in the trunks or the main cross grid lines can be done in a couple of ways. You can do them very short on each 5-dot pattern, or you can connect 3 dots in a row. And if you do it on the larger scale, it gives you larger diamond shapes that you can then have more room to have more twists and turns on the inside. Whereas if you do it on the smaller scale, you're more limited to the traditional, triangular keys. So I've been working a lot with the grids and how the grid can be manipulated and how that affects the finished product. So.
Thank you.
For Stephen, you're on to this mystery and discovery. Is there any other projects that might follow up with that?
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. Testing. Having looked into Michael O'Connor and having found a number of his works, it brought me to Listowel, obviously. And I've discovered that Listowel is really a hot pot of contemporary Celtic art. Not contemporary Celtic art, excuse me, but Celtic revival art. And over the last 150 years, there have been plasterers, there are people who have worked in repoussé work, there are people who worked with pins and wire, making extraordinary stuff. There's about 10 other producers over the last 150 years. And you're talking about a small town of about 4,000 to 5,000 people. So it's not like they're coming out of Dublin and you've got 10 producers. They're coming out of this little hot pot. And I don't really hesitate to call it the world's capital of modern Celtic art because of the amount of different media that have come out of, the amount of Celtic art over different media that have come out of Listowel over the last 150 years. Some of it is Gaelic revival. It can mix in with Celtic art. Some of it, all of it is done out of passion, and that's not just from a professional sense of, they weren't really commissioned to do all this. This is stuff they did when they came home, and did it in their spare time. And yes, that's a project that is going to be on my radar over the next 5-6 years. I hope to expand on that and perhaps write a book on it. Who knows? Well, I have actually been told to write the book, but
Thank you.
I have to get over the Michael O'Connor part first.
So the truth is I have questions for everyone, burning questions, but so if I don't want to be greedy, so if I don't ask you now, I'll come for you later. I have a question for Michael Carroll. I was wondering if you have thoughts about, there's kind of big family groups, I suppose, of square key patterns or orthogonal key patterns, in addition to the ones that show up on Roman mosaics. And I was wondering if you have thoughts about how they fit into the chronology along, of diagonal patterns.
It's interesting. Being a devotee of JRL, and I've kind of concentrated on the diagonal patterns more than the orthogonal. But obviously, the orthogonal ones came earlier because we have examples of those in Greco-Roman art, and they do appear in several places, both in the stones and the manuscripts, as well as the diagonal. My thought is that it's more the preference, the insular preference for the diagonal, that tends to lead them to you see more of the diagonal key patterns than you do the orthogonal. But I think it's probably I would think I would have expected the earlier pieces to have the more orthogonal and the later ones to have the diagonal. But I haven't concentrated a lot on the orthogonal. My own research has mostly been in the diamond patterns and the diagonal. But I think they both operate out of the same principles. It's just you're just turning the square this way or this way, and you still have the 4 points at which you can bring the lines into the maze. So. It's really the same thing, just turned around, and the only difference really is when you turn them around, you get those triangular blank spots on the sides. So they're kind of two sides of the same coin, as far as I'm concerned.
I'd just like to make a comment. I'd just like to thank Stephen so much for resurrecting Michael O'Connor. It seems to me the equivalent in the Celtic revival world of opening Tutankhamun's tomb. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. It's like I said, it's been discovery all the way, from Michael O'Connor and the works of art to my own discoveries in what I enjoy now. And very interesting 4 years so far. And there are many more years to come in it. There's no two ways about it. Thank you.
This message, goodness. This question is for David. I know you mentioned you're working with university to sort of try to determine the timing it would have taken to create all the Pictish stones. Are you using the same type of techniques and tools? Obviously, there's been some advancement since the originals were made. How do you account for that, or are you using the same type of techniques and tools that would have been used in the past?
Well, it's a hammer and a chisel,
Yeah.
so it's not changed massively, right? They're still the sort of same shape. They're not complicated machines. We use slightly different materials. We use tungsten carbide tipped chisels. We don't have to sharpen them as often, but with a high carbon steel chisel and a decent whetstone, an ancient stone carver would have been pretty much as fast as I am. So it's not fundamentally different. And anyone who tells you that they didn't have access to steel in the early medieval period doesn't understand how chisels work. It had to be steel. And at the point you can produce bellows to make it hot enough, and charcoal to borrow the carbon into the iron, you can produce high carbon steel. And we've been doing that for a long, long time. And you see the same people from the early medieval through to the late medieval. You see the same people commemorated on monuments. You see the aristocracy, the priests. You see their wives. You see warriors. You see certain tradesmen, and you see blacksmiths, because they know how to make hard iron, right? So if you can make hard iron, you can make steel. You can make sharp swords, and therefore you're important. You're elevated within society. So in answer to your question, they're using pretty much the same things that I use, so yeah, pretty much the same.
Thank you.
Hi, just for a question for Dave there. Archaeologically, there's a lot of discussion as to whether the picture stones were painted. I was wondering, do you paint any of yours? Or, sometimes, it looks very gaudy, but is it more authentic? Is it not? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, there was some, Jordan Patrick, I think, is doing the, yes, I'm sure we've had this conversation before. There are certainly some pigments being found on stones at places like Port Mahomack. My own view is that pictish stones are carved in such a way that they don't need to be painted to be seen very well and understood. So my feeling is that some of the stones were probably painted some of the time. You can almost envisage a situation where maybe on a feast day or whatever, the stone is painted for that day and it's painted every year. What I'd love to do is a little project at Aberlemno where they've got a little bothy out the back, carve a new Aberlemno pictish stone and get the kids to gather pigments from within 10 miles of that place and paint it that way and repaint it every year, repaint it differently. It'd be fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Good question.
David, you again, please. I was just wondering, have you ever thought about pre-metalwork and stonework and Neolithic stone carvings and how you might do that?
No.
It's worth a shot.
No, yeah, actually, I probably would give it a shot. Yeah, why not?
It's for Hamish. You've told a lot of nice stories in your paintings.
Thanks.
What story haven't you told that you want to?
What story haven't I told? I know you put me on the spot on that one. I wanted to continue that series of portraits of Celtic gods and goddesses, but I also, I have this radio program. I do 2 hours of music on St Andrew's Day, and I wanted to continue some of the saints as well. And there's a lot of history and folklore and imagery around St Andrew that I would quite like to do a little portrait of him. That's the one that immediately springs to mind. A lot more picture stuff maybe. My family's from that kind of area, and I've got a few tattooed on me actually underneath all this. And I don't know, and the Irish Rovers stuff continues to be, I do all their album covers, and each one of them, I didn't put them on slide there today. Saints and Sinners was a little bit off the wall and some irreverent stuff going on that one. And the last one was No End in Sight, was their last album, and that kind of had the world map decorated with Celtic stuff, and like the voyages of Columbus. It was how the Irish Rovers left here and went over to Canada and then into America, and little dotted lines showed their journey around the planet doing concerts and stuff. So, my mainstay these days is album covers for those guys, and they have no plans of stopping anytime soon.
I can't stop myself, so I have a question for Ruth. I don't know very much about felting, but it seems to me perfectly suited for making interlace, because you can make the underlying shadow and then work out your overs and unders, and it seems perfectly suited. So and also very possible to do historically. Do you have evidence of? Do you know of evidence of large scale felting like that from the Middle Ages?
To be honest, there wasn't really a lot of evidence of felting in the British Isles until maybe the last 30 or 40 years. It's very much a Middle Eastern and Far East thing. I mean, there's I believe archaeological evidence of Roman soldiers putting wool in the soles of their sandals, which with the sweat from their feet became felt. So there is some examples of felt from very early on, but it wasn't a decorative art form in Europe. So no, it's a modern phenomenon, really.
Thank you.
Thank you. Some great questions there and some great answers. We've learnt an awful lot today, and we've had such a variety of information over the last 2 days about different media and different techniques, historic and modern. So a great finish to today's talks, and also having heard about pictish stones and carving, it's nice to be able to go up to the cathedral now and see some more carved stones. It's a nice follow-on. So I hope you'll all join us to thank our speakers this morning and this afternoon. And if you'd like to collect your things together, we'll be here again obviously tomorrow morning at 10 for our last session. But I hope you will join our group as we go up to the cathedral. So as I mentioned, we're going to leave from the entrance, go up the steps again, and then left along the Mall and meet at the cathedral. It'd be nice to be there about 3. That's plenty of time, I think, to get up there. And we'll talk about the crosses and architecture of the Hill of Down. So thank you very much.
No.